building Sucrose as a support. So this actually isn't too expensive in terms of weapons because it's going to either be, some 4 stars that you could get from the gacha, or, some craftable things, or even some 3-star stuff. 5 stars, if you have them, I probably would lean towards being more of a DPS for Sucrose, but she could still work with these options here. So Sacrificial Fragments is probably going to be the absolute best option as a support, simply because it's going to help reduce the cooldown of your own elemental skill, and it's insanely good. If you have it, period, it's amazing, but refined, it gets even freaking better. And it has Elemental Mastery, which is basically what Sucrose needs as a support. She is so desperate for extra Elemental Mastery simply because her talents just thrive off of them so that she can help support the other teams. Kind of what I'm going for. Next, we have the Map of Mare, which also has Elemental Mastery, which is great. It's craftable. It's an amazing weapon. That's what I ended up going with. Just good. Favonius Codex also does really good here. It actually has energy recharge, which is slightly different from Elemental Mastery. I think if you go with the Codex, you definitely want to try to prioritize more Elemental Mastery in your artifacts, but kind of go with what you got. If you don't have Sacrificial Fragments, or if you don't have a prototype to actually make the Map of Mare from the blacksmith, then Favonius Codex definitely works. Just get your Elemental Mastery out of your artifacts instead. Then Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, which is it doesn't actually have energy recharge or elemental mastery, which is kind of awkward, but it actually does do really well as a support, simply until you get a better weapon for her so that you can help just increase attack percent for the next incoming character. Now, in terms of artifacts, just like as a DPS, I would honestly just say Veridice and Veneer makes the most sense. I think the use case of Veridice is going to slightly change because you are going to use Sucrose to get this extra 4-piece effect off, and then just switch into your main DPS, do those elemental reactions based on their resistance drop, and just do extra damage that way. Like I said in the DPS video, if you wanted to, you could go with Wanderer's Troop and maybe the Inspector set, or there are a couple of different options. You could go with Exile to get more energy recharge so that you can get off her burst more as a support, but typically I wouldn't go with those unless you are just waiting to get better Veridice and Veneer pieces. That's just me. Now, as far as your substats and just your artifact setup in general, you could go with the Nemo-based damage here. Mine is set up with my Venti set, so it has a Nemo-based damage, which is what you would see if you watch the full guide. But typically, Elemental Mastery is going to be king here. If you can set up Elemental Mastery on at least 2 out of these 3 pieces, you're going to be golden. If you ended up going with the Favonius Codex, definitely just try to go with, all 3 of these pieces of Elemental Mastery, maybe. I think that would be pretty awesome. You might want to go with Energy Recharge on your timepiece. And then, of course, like I said, maybe a Nemo damage here. And as a fallback, you could just go for attack. Now, as far as these talents, I personally would go with the Elemental Skill as my first priority, simply because you're going to be using it a ton. Then definitely go for your Elemental Burst. You're going to be using it quite often. If you build a energy recharge kit into her, if you use Favonius Codex, or if you have it in your artifacts set up to where she has really good energy recharge, I would actually shift focus onto the elemental burst, simply so that you can get it off more often, but that would depend on how you end up building her. And then last but not least, you could focus on your normal attack if you even want to. That's completely up to you though. Just remember that as a support, you want to focus as much on elemental mastery as you can so that you can get these reactions off and keep doing extra damage with your other party members, so that you can simply just do a ton of reaction damage. Elemental damage in general is what Sucrose helps support. It's what she puts up on a pedestal, boys.